In votes left uncounted, there's a possibility, although not particularly large, there's a possibility that Donald Trump could actually cinch the popular vote too. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter if Donald Trump wins the popular vote or not. The reason is the popular vote right now has been determined in California and New York State. New York State are both known to be rather, well, shall we say, liberal. And that's, that's just how those states operate. They are very liberal states, and there's no two ways about it. Liberal. New York, pretty dang liberal. That's just how it is. It's like Washington State is pretty dang liberal. Illinois tends to lean rather liberal too. That's just how it works. That's just how they operate. So it's expected that those states are going to have a lot of liberal voters, especially in cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Oakland, Berkeley. You're going to have a lot of people who are going to vote very liberal. That being the case, and because most of the population is on the coasts, which again tend to be very liberal, you're going to have people who are going to overwhelm. If you look at county count, if you look at counties, right, and if you count the counties, you'll see that there is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, if you look at the map, Donald Trump won. There's no way he didn't. But if you look at population, he lost by about 1 million votes. Not even that, actually. It's a pretty close margin. National Business Times, with more than 4 million votes left to be counted, Clinton's margin of victory could soon be much higher in the popular vote. Of course, you can never predict these things because they said Donald Trump would lose in a landslide. In Michigan, officials are still counting the state's presidential election results in a tight race between Trump and Clinton, as expected to go to the Republican candidate. Unofficial results from the Michigan Secretary of State's office show that Trump is already ahead by roughly 13,000 votes, and state officials say the results are unlikely to change. Michigan's 83 counties will now have until November the 22nd to finalize the vote count, and the State Board of Canvassers will make it official on the 28th. So far, Clinton has 47.3% of the vote. Donald Trump has 47.6% of the vote. That's a really, really close margin. Donald Trump, and that's within 1%, so within the margin of error. Donald Trump will be the first Republican to take Michigan since George H.W. Bush took the state back in 1988. 1988 was the last time a Republican took the state of Michigan, and that was about a generation ago, believe it or not. Because people born in 1988 could very well be having kids right now who are, 5 and 6 years old. It's weird to think about, but that could very well be the case. So it's about a generation ago. But that's how it works. That's how the world works. The world doesn't always work in your favor, and that's something that people need to learn. Now, I fully expected that Trump would win, but I was fully willing to accept if Clinton would win. Now, the thing is, if Clinton won, we would have a much worse situation than what we have right now, and here's why. Even if you're a Democrat, you may agree with me here. In a way worse situation for this very reason, because if Hillary Clinton won, such an uproar of people who are very upset about the results of the election, who would feel like they were swindled out of a chance for a fair election, because, you see, very well should have been the candidate. And Bernie Sanders and Clinton are very different. Very, very different. In policy, in personality, in likability, they're very different people. It's not particularly likable. And even if you do like her, you have to admit it's not easy to like her. Now, here's the other thing about Clinton that needs to be noted. She is very much a statist, and she's very pro-war in almost every sense of the word. She was for the Iraq War. She was for the war on terror. She was Secretary of State during the Arab Spring, and she led a lot of efforts to get arms to Libyans, to Syrians, and to other people in the Middle East and Northern Africa. So you can't say that Clinton is anti-war, because she's very obviously not. Her policies led to and abetted. What's Donald Trump's policy on war? Well, we know he opposed the Iraq War, but that's really about it. He said the Iraq War is a disaster. Okay, most people agree on that. Who fought in it are disastrous or anything like that. He's saying the war was a disaster, which it was. That's pretty much a done deal. We know that the war was a disaster. But Donald Trump turns out to be a very pro-war kind of guy. Well, that would be bad, but he would have a lot of support in the Congress. And that's a benefit Donald Trump would have, which Clinton possibly wouldn't. See, a Clinton win for the presidency would mean she would have opposition at every turn from the Senate and the House of Representatives, which would actually be good for conservatives, oddly enough. Think about this. When in the election back in 2008 and 2012, you saw a huge surge of people who were buying guns, who were buying ammunition, who were buying all sorts of prepper tools because they really believed President Obama would be the end of times for America, which turned out to not be true, but that's what they believed. And election, President Obama surged the gun industry. President Obama was the biggest thing to happen to the gun industry in a long time, probably since Clinton won, since the Clinton ban. He was probably the biggest and best thing to ever happen to the weapons industry, believe it or not. Like he's the antichrist of guns. He's really not. He's possibly the savior of the gun industry because him getting elected caused a lot of people to buy a lot of guns. So thank you, President Obama, for both driving up the price of AR-15s and causing there to be a huge stimulation to the gun market through really no action whatsoever. There's never been in the last any kind of federal regulation on firearms, which, of course, as we all know, is a good thing because you don't want regulation on firearms. But here's my position on regulation. Not regulation on much of anything. Well, you do, but not the way that we usually think of it. See, here's the thing with regulation. It starts out very well-intentioned, and it usually ends just the opposite because then you get lobbyists and you get all sorts of other problems. Here's the thing with regulation. Think about it this way. Regulation will start out as a simple, they call it common sense, but there's no such thing, common sense regulation on this or that. A state ordinance or a state regulation on this or that. Then you have city ordinance on this or that, or county commission regulation on this or that. And it continues down to the municipal level, to even possibly the homeowners association level. It gets down to be so pedantic that it makes your mind explode. Sense with something like guns, but what about something like, say, sharing your house with someone? Like we have now with the regulation on short-term rentals, short-term vacation rentals. People act like short-term vacation rentals are the end times for the housing market for some reason, when we all know the end times for the housing market happened in 2008, but whatever, and it's going to happen again soon. But the housing market and the short-term rental service thing is really not a big deal, but they're acting like it's the biggest deal to ever happen to anything. And so you have state regulators who want to put more money into a system that's going to cause there to be more regulation. And because you have more regulation, now you have to have more enforcement. And for that enforcement, you have to send funding to the enforcement agencies. And so it becomes a long chain of bureaucracy helping bureaucracy. You have a collation of government. You have government services helping out other government services. Regulation never works in the best interests of the people. Well, rarely works in the best interests of the people, especially when it comes down to something like firearms. Like, say, you might say that, well, the Second Amendment does guarantee the right to bear arms, but those arms must be, we'll say, bolt-action rifles only. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that on a federal level, you can only own bolt-action rifles. But then on a state level, they'll have a separate regulation for what a bolt-action rifle is. They'll say you can only own straight-pull Swiss K98s. Okay, or sorry, not Swiss K98s, but you can only own straight-pull Swiss and Swedish guns with the Bakelite handles that go straight back and straight forward. Okay, so that's the definition of a bolt-action rifle. But that means Mausers, Mosins, Springfields, those are all out of the question. You can't own those. You see where regulation goes too far, because they'll just keep refining the definition of things until it gets to the point where you can't own anything. Like, say, there'll be a regulation on a certain type of engine, but then they'll say this certain type of engine is also this certain type of engine, and the regulation just goes until you can't own a car unless it's a state-approved car that's been through several contractors, which are all state-approved contractors, which leads to essentially controlled economy, which is what we have right now. You're fooling yourself if you think on a national level the United States is a free market, because it's not. Look at all the regulation. Look at all the contractors. Look at all the regulation on what you can and can't buy, how you can and can't export to different states. It's ridiculous. It's utterly, completely farce. It's a complete muck-up of how free markets should operate. So we do not have a free market in the United States. We have a controlled economy. We have controlled capitalism. We don't have free market. Now, a free market system may exist in a small scale on a local level, and that's the best way for it to exist, quite frankly. But it's not existing right now on a national level. And the reason for that is because we keep electing people like Donald Trump and like Hillary Clinton. See, I'm not letting Trump off the hook here. I will say he was the better choice out of the two, but I'm not letting him entirely off the hook here. I got to be fair to everybody. Now, Donald Trump was by far the best choice out of the two. I will say that. But that's sort of the gun to your head, you must pick one scenario. Yes, Donald Trump was easily the best pick out of the two, but he wasn't the best pick, period. Now, if we could go back in time to 2008 and get Ron Paul elected, I would never complain again. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. If Donald Trump would appoint Ron Paul to, say, Secretary of the Treasury, I would be the happiest person on the planet, and I would never complain about anything ever again. But that's probably not going to happen, unfortunately. Donald Trump seems like someone who has really good intentions, just like most politicians. They have really good intentions, but it ends up not working out that way. Now, Donald Trump has the favor of not being a politician. He's never had office of any kind other than, a penthouse suite and an office in a nice building. Those are offices he's had, but he's never had a municipal office, a state office, a city, county, or even national office of any kind, or even appointed position, which actually probably acts in his favor, believe it or not. Clinton is too far deep in the system. Trump is not. He's not really in the system at all, which, again, acts in his favor. But I'm not letting him off the hook. I'm going to criticize him just like I criticized Clinton if she got elected, which is only fair. That's what I have to do. It's kind of my job. Right now, I've not seen a major muck-up on the side of Trump with the appointing of anyone. Although the transition process has been kind of a weird process, that's not really his fault. That's more Pence's job. So I won't blame Trump for that one right now. But the thing that really has bothered me about the whole election process has been how the media has treated people who have voted for Trump. And I'm not even acting in the defense of Donald Trump himself. I'm acting right now in the defense of people who voted for him. I would do the same thing if it was people who voted for Clinton, because there are businesses now which are saying, oh, we're not going to serve people who voted for Trump. Well, these are the same people who said that the Christian cafe must bake a cake for the gay couple. So, contradiction there already. But think about it. You have protesters from out of state, in most cases, who are being paid to protest this election of Donald Trump. And at the end of it, nothing different is going to happen. Nothing's going to change at the end of this protest. They're going to go home. They're going to buy games on Steam. They're going to play video games, and they're going to watch the news and be upset and comment on it on Facebook for the rest of their lives. And that's going to be it. That's going to be the extent of it. This whole protest process, this whole election process, this whole controversy is not solving any problems, and it's not really getting anything done. You see, that's the difference between the Tea Party and these Occupy Wall Street kids who are protesting right now. The Tea Party, if that even exists as an entity, got people elected, right? There are people who are elected right now who will say, I'm a Tea Party kind of guy. Like Ted Cruz was one of those people. Ted Cruz openly said he was a Tea Party patriot kind of guy. He was a Tea Party candidate. All right, cool. So the Tea Party, after the election of Obama, got things done to its credit. Now, I'm not 100% Tea Party because I still think it's a little bit too neocon for my taste, but it got things done to its credit. Occupy Wall Street, this whole leftist agenda, this whole leftist movement has not really gotten anything done. There's not been a massive change as a result of leftist protesting. Occupy Wall Street didn't really change anything other than make a bunch of people disgruntled. Even Black Lives Matter, to its credit, got things done. There's still people who are having a conversation about that. You're not really seeing that. There wasn't really a legitimate message there. Okay, so you're occupying Wall Street. Now what? We're going to hope people pass a law that makes it so that insider trading doesn't happen nearly as much, and that politicians aren't nearly as much in bed with politicians, or politicians aren't nearly as in bed with Wall Street actors as they were before. Okay, cool. And then they go and vote for Clinton, who gave speeches for Goldman Sachs. It doesn't really make any sense there now, does it? There's a huge contradiction, but if you tell them there's one, they'll act like you're trying to tear down their reality, because you are. Clinton is in bed with Goldman Sachs. She's in bed with international interests. She's in bed with Saudi Arabia, for heaven's sakes, but will pretend like she's the candidate for the people, of the people, by the people. She's not. She couldn't be. And this is where localism comes into play, because on a national setting, you're not going to see massive change like you would hope. On a local setting, you are. In March, we have an election for the mayor. Mayor Andy Burke has made a lot of decisions, to his credit. He's made a lot of decisions that have made a lot of people upset, to his credit. Mayor Andy Burke is someone who's a controversial figure in Chattanooga. Mayor Andy Burke is someone who has made a lot of feathers ruffled. Mayor Andy Burke is someone who has also gotten a lot of things done that he wanted to get done, to his credit. Now, whether or not you wanted those things to get done, that's up to you. I can't tell you what to think. But Mayor Andy Burke is someone who's a controversial figure. And of course, there's the whole affair scandal to deal with, too. So the mayor is someone who has a lot of pull in your city. He's essentially the CEO of the city, and you're the shareholders. He's the CEO of the city, and you can vote him out if you want to, or make him stay if you want to. Full disclosure, I live in Catoosa County, so I'm not voting. I mean, I can't. I can't vote for the mayor of Chattanooga. I don't live here. I don't even live in Hamilton County. So I have no pull in this election. But I will tell you this. There are now options. You can decide to go on the course of more bike lanes, potentially. You can decide to go on the course of more urban development that's funded by the city and not the free market. And you can vote for Mayor Andy Burke as the incumbent. Or you can vote on the side of more conservative ideas, perhaps a bigger focus on public transit, which Larry Groen seems to want, and less regulation on different aspects of your life, which is, again, what Larry Groen seems to want. You could also vote for Chris Long, who has a lot of other different ideas. Or you could vote for David Crockett, who has even more different ideas, who tends to lean more liberal, libertarian kind of odd position, which I like people who have odd positions. I think that that's very interesting. And yeah, he should run for mayor. That's good. More people should run for mayor. There should be more competition. So we have a big race ahead of us that is a heck of a lot more important than the presidential one, believe it or not. I would say by far the most important elections in your area are county commissioners, city council people, the mayor, and the sheriff. The mayor is extremely important because the mayor is the person who appoints the chief of police. Now, the chief of police in Saudi Daisy, I've met. Seems like a really cool guy. Jeff Gann. I like the guy a lot, actually. He seems like he's really neat. He's very open to criticism. He likes what we do. I think Jeff Gann's a good guy. I really like him, I will say. He doesn't necessarily have my professional endorsement, but I think he's a great guy. I talked to him a little bit, very genuine. I like him. He seems like a solid dude. And we have in Chattanooga, or Hamilton County, I should say, the sheriff, who is right now Jim Hammond. Jim Hammond seems like a solid guy. I like Jim Hammond. He seems all right. We have the police chief, Fred Fletcher. Now, Fletcher's done some things I don't really like. I don't think the VRI works. I think it's an utter failure. I don't think that he's necessarily ready, potentially, to be a police chief. But he seems like a solid guy. That's the thing about Fletcher. He seems like a solid guy. It just doesn't seem like he's fit for the job, or maybe he's just not doing it the way I like. Maybe that's it. You know, maybe he is fit for the job. He's just not doing it the way I like. And the thing is, the VRI doesn't really work. Some of the policies he's implemented just don't really work, but some of the changes he's made have, actually. For instance, I like what the police are doing, where they'll walk by, they'll see in your vehicle that there's a cell phone visible, and they'll put a little flyer on your windshield saying, hey, we saw that there's a cell phone and there's a laptop and there are valuables in your car. We just want to let you know about that free of charge. I think that's really cool, and that's a cool initiative they're doing. It's neat. It's a good idea. It's obviously geared towards helping people, and they're not asking for anything really in return. I think that's great. That's a good initiative, but that's something the sheriff could do. That's the thing. Yeah, the chief of police can do that, but the sheriff could very easily do that too. That's something that could be done by deputies. So, brings up a conundrum. If the police are doing something that the sheriff could just as easily do and his deputies could just as easily do, why do we necessarily need to have a police force under the city when you have a sheriff's force, which is under the county and has a elected official? Brings up a conundrum. Now, I'm not anti-police. I want to make that clear. I like cops, believe it or not. I think that they tend to be pretty solid dudes. The thing is, I question the necessity of the position, right? Like, I might like an employee who's redundant, but I'll say his position is redundant. I like the guy, but his position is redundant. We don't really need him because there's someone else who does his job already. So either find something else for him to do or eliminate the position. And this is not a violent call. Make that clear. This is not a violent call. This is just something that needs to be discussed, needs to be brought up, because it's not an anti-cop move. It's a perhaps anti-municipal government move, or maybe it's more anti-taxpayer dollars being spent on a redundant service move. That's how I would look at it anyway. Just food for thought. I'm not saying fire them all. I'm just saying, what should we do? Maybe we should merge the police and the sheriff or something. I don't know. It just seems kind of redundant. But the election of the mayor means the appointing potentially of a new police chief, because Police Chief Fred Fletcher might not stay under a new mayor. So that's a move that affects us as people living in Hamilton County, as people who live in Chattanooga. That's a very apparent and a very evident, a very necessary thing to happen. Is not the appointing of a new police chief, but the appointing of a police chief is something that's very necessary. It's something that we all are affected by. That being the case, I would say by far the election of a police chief, or rather the election of a mayor and a sheriff and a city council person and a county commissioner, are infinitely more important than even the election potentially of a senator, because these people have an immediate impact on your life, which the president doesn't necessarily. Are we going to see massive change from Barack Obama to President Donald Trump? I kind of don't think so, at least not immediately in a way that we would understand, in a way that really affects us immediately. Now, would we see immediate change under the election of a new mayor? Yes, we would. For better or for worse, we would, because a new mayor can make all sorts of executive decisions about how the city is going to be run. Now, we live in the city, and the city's in the county's in the state, and the state's in the country. You see all the different layers of separation between you and the federal level. There are a lot. The federal level doesn't really affect us nearly as much as the local officials do. Look at Miss Gaddy in Dunlap. Mrs. Gaddy is being affected very apparently and very evidently by an entity that exists locally. This is not the ATF barging onto her property and saying she has a stockpile of weapons. This is the city of Dunlap saying she's within Dunlap city limits and she has to pay taxes and she has to evict her house because it's an eyesore. Gaddy, right? She lives down the street. She's our neighbor. So why aren't we worrying about the city of Dunlap? Why aren't we worrying about the county of Hamilton, right? Why aren't we worrying about these things? And we're directing all of our anger and frustration instead at the federal level, which is very angering and very frustrating. But perhaps our anger and our frustration is misdirected, because after all, the American system tends to act in sort of a trickle-up kind of way. Because remember, President Obama was a senator. Senators get elected by local people and then became the president. Now, if the local people had never elected him to be senator, he would never be president, most likely. So it trickles up. You might have someone like Bob Corker, who was governor, and then he became senator. Or sorry, he was senator, never governor. But he was running for positions here locally. He became someone who was very important. Now he's a senator here in Chattanooga, or rather he's a senator representing Tennessee in the Senate. So he's someone who was elected in and now is being looked at for federal positions. You see, it trickles up. Now, Corker seems to be, I won't say 100% solid because he has positions I don't agree with, but is he a good guy? Yeah. I'd say Bob Corker is a good guy. He has positions I don't agree with, but he's a good guy who was elected by local people. It trickles up, not down. Keep that in mind. So vote local people, vote in local people who you like, and vote with your conscience locally. That's a lot more important than nationally. This is Best Shot here on Hot News Talk Radio. I hope that eases your mind a little bit. And it's important to vote. Just it's more important to vote locally. This is Best Shot here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and Nooga Radio, AM 1240, and NoogaRadio.com. Make sure you get us on the website, NoogaRadio.com, and like us on Facebook, get us on Twitter, and get us on every other social media platform you can fathom, because we're on all of them. This is Best Shot.